Who should initiate intimacy in a relationship? In a city where ambition never sleeps, where love is expected to be strong, modern, and effortless, one question quietly destroys more relationships than betrayal ever could. Who should initiate intimacy in a relationship? In Abuja, Tariq and Nnenna look like the perfect modern couple. Educated, successful, engaged, in love. But behind the polished smiles and Instagram-ready lives, something is missing. He's afraid to initiate, scared by rejection. She's waiting, thinking his silence means he no longer desires her. Both are in the same room, but miles apart. This is not just their story. It's the story of couples everywhere, waiting, assuming, and silently drifting. Is intimacy about confidence or courage? About dominance or reassurance? Set in modern-day Abuja, Signals in the Silence is a powerful love story that asks the question most couples avoid and reveals the answer that can save a marriage. Watch till the end. It might change how you love. Welcome to African Stories by Frank Asada. Where are you watching from? Before we dive into the who should initiate intimacy in a relationship, we encourage you to rate the video and tell us in the comments below, in a relationship, should the man or woman initiate intimacy? Let us know where you are watching from. Like, share and subscribe so that you will be the first to be notified of our next video coming up. Tariq first noticed Nnenna in the university library in Abuja, where silence felt heavier than noise. She sat by the window, surrounded by color-coded notes, her concentration broken only when she smiled politely at passers-by. That smile lingered in his thoughts long after he returned to his dorm. Tariq was thoughtful, reserved, and deliberate, while Nnenna carried warmth effortlessly, speaking with her eyes and laughter. Their first conversation happened over a shared textbook, then stretched into hours of talking about dreams, fears, and faith. Love arrived quietly, without fireworks, but with certainty. They learned each other's rhythms, his pauses, her expressive gestures. Intimacy grew from trust, from late-night walks, whispered confessions, and the comfort of being seen. In college, affection felt natural, unmeasured, and unafraid, as though the world had given them permission to explore closeness without consequence. As semesters passed, Tariq and Nnenna became inseparable. They studied together, prayed together, and dreamed aloud about the future. Their love life blossomed not from urgency but from emotional safety. They learned each other's boundaries, discovering that desire often followed reassurance. Tariq felt safe expressing affection because Nnenna responded warmly, never rushing him, never mocking his caution. Nnenna felt desired because Tariq's attention was intentional, never careless. Physical intimacy grew as an extension of emotional closeness, slow, mutual, and affirming. They communicated easily then, believing love alone was enough to guide them. Their friends admired them, calling their bond effortless. Nnenna realized that what felt effortless was actually careful listening and consistent reassurance. College gave them space to be curious without pressure, to initiate or wait without fear. In that season, silence never meant rejection, it simply meant patience. By their final year, Tariq and Nnenna spoke openly about forever. They imagined careers, children, and a shared home filled with laughter. Their intimacy was balanced, sometimes Tariq initiated, sometimes Nnenna did, but neither kept score. Each understood the other's cues instinctively. A look, a touch, a shared joke was enough. They believed this understanding would last unchanged. Graduation approached, and with it, the quiet anxiety of adulthood. Yet love still felt abundant. They promised each other continuity, unaware that transitions often reshape affection. In that final season of campus life, intimacy was woven into daily routine, protected by proximity and time. They did not yet know that real life would demand clearer communication, braver vulnerability, and a redefinition of what it meant to initiate love when comfort no longer came automatically. After college, moving in together felt like a celebration. Their small apartment became a sanctuary of shared routines, cooking late dinners, dancing in socks, falling asleep mid-conversation. Freedom brought excitement, and intimacy thrived in the novelty of independence. They explored each other again, rediscovering closeness in quiet mornings and spontaneous nights. Without academic pressure, time felt abundant. Initiation was playful, unguarded, and mutual. They believed they had mastered partnership. Love felt practical now, rooted in responsibility but still rich with desire. Each day reinforced their belief that choosing each other was easy. They laughed at how natural everything felt, mistaking alignment for permanence. Those early years of living together were marked by joy. They built traditions, Friday movies, Sunday reflections, small surprises left on pillows. Physical affection remained frequent, but more importantly, it felt safe. They believed love was self-sustaining, unaware that comfort can sometimes disguise avoidance. Still, happiness carried them forward. In those moments, neither imagined that silence could someday replace ease, or that both might one day wait, quietly, stubbornly, for the other to speak first. Careers came next, each success reinforcing their sense of partnership and shared destiny. Tariq finally landed a role he had worked toward for years, a position that validated his patience, discipline, and quiet ambition. Nnenna, equally driven, found deep purpose in her chosen field, where her empathy and intelligence were recognized and rewarded. They celebrated promotions and small victories with dinners, weekend getaways, and proud phone calls to family, convinced that professional fulfillment strengthened their bond. Work energized them, giving them confidence and direction, but it also began to compete for their attention in subtle ways. Long hours turned into late nights, exhaustion replaced spontaneity, and affection became something postponed rather than pursued. Still, love remained present, gentle touches in passing, quick kisses before sleep, but it lacked its former urgency. They assumed this shift was normal, temporary, a natural adjustment to adulthood. Life felt wonderfully full, and that fullness quietly masked the distance slowly forming between them. As responsibilities grew, intimacy slowly shifted from something organic and instinctive into something planned, almost negotiated around deadlines and fatigue. Moments that once happened naturally now required intention, and even then, they often felt postponed. Neither Tariq nor Nnenna addressed the change directly. Tariq hesitated, carrying a quiet fear of appearing needy or vulnerable, especially when he believed Nnenna might be too tired or distracted. Nnenna noticed the shift but dismissed her unease, convincing herself that this was simply how mature relationships evolved. She believed love deepened even when passion softened. Both assumed the other understood without explanation. Their individual successes filled them with pride and gratitude, yet those same achievements created a silence neither knew how to break. They continued thriving professionally, moving forward with confidence and recognition, each accomplishment reinforcing the image of a successful, balanced couple. From the outside, everything appeared aligned, careers advancing, finances stabilizing, futures clearly mapped out. Yet something subtle softened between them, almost imperceptible at first. Touch, once instinctive and reassuring, became less frequent, reduced to quick embraces and absent-minded gestures. Conversations shifted from dreams and feelings to schedules, errands, and upcoming obligations. They spoke often, but said little of what truly mattered. Still, happiness felt intact, supported by routine and shared responsibility. They laughed, planned trips, and reassured each other that love was steady, just quieter. Neither wanted to question something that seemed functional. But beneath the calm surface, a quiet longing began to stir, a sense that something essential was missing, unnamed and unacknowledged. The moment they finally noticed the absence, it no longer felt small, and the silence around it suddenly felt heavy and undeniable. The proposal came beautifully, crafted with the same quiet thoughtfulness that had always defined Tariq's love. He planned every detail carefully, choosing a moment that felt intimate rather than extravagant, a setting filled with shared memories and unspoken meaning. His voice trembled as he spoke, not from uncertainty, but from the weight of hope and commitment. When he asked, Nnenna's answer came instantly, wrapped in tears, laughter, and a joy so pure it felt like a return to their earliest days. She said yes without hesitation, her hands shaking as she pulled him close. Family celebrated soon after, phone calls filled with blessings, excitement, and careful questions about dates, venues, and traditions. Plans unfolded quickly, guest lists, budgets, timelines, each decision reinforcing the reality of forever. For a moment, love felt renewed, sharpened by purpose and promise. Yet engagement brought more than excitement, it brought expectation. Beneath the joy lingered quiet assumptions about roles, readiness, and intimacy, unspoken beliefs about how love should flow now that commitment was official, even as neither quite knew how to voice them. As preparations progressed, intimacy quietly receded, slipping into the background beneath mounting responsibilities and constant decision-making. Wedding plans consumed their conversations, vendors, budgets, schedules, and family expectations filling the space where tenderness once lived. Stress replaced spontaneity, and exhaustion often won over desire. Even when they shared the same room, their minds were elsewhere, tangled in to-do lists and unspoken worries. Both noticed the change, felt it in the pauses between touches and the absence of lingering looks, yet neither spoke about it. Tariq feared naming the distance might make it real or sound like a complaint. Nnenna worried that bringing it up would seem ungrateful or dramatic during what was supposed to be a joyful season. So they smiled, reassured each other that everything was fine, and kept moving forward. In the silence, affection didn't disappear entirely, but it waited, uncertain, for permission to return. They began to miss each other without knowing how to say it, a quiet ache that settled into ordinary moments. Tariq felt it most in the evenings, sitting beside Nnenna on the couch while scrolling through his phone, aware of her presence yet longing for the closeness they once shared so effortlessly. He wanted to reach for her, to say something meaningful, but the words never seemed to form in time. Nnenna felt it in the mornings, noticing how their routines had grown efficient but emotionally distant, two people moving in sync, yet rarely pausing to truly connect. She missed the warmth of unhurried conversations, the way he once looked at her as if nothing else mattered. Both sensed the absence of something vital, but neither could name it clearly. They feared misinterpreting the feeling, afraid that speaking up might reveal disappointment or rejection. So they carried the longing silently, each assuming the other was content, unaware that they were both waiting for the same invitation to come closer. Tariq's past rejections resurfaced quietly but powerfully, creeping into moments that once felt safe. Memories of earlier relationships, times when his affection had been questioned or dismissed, returned as self-doubt. Each hesitation from Nnenna, whether real or imagined, reinforced his fear of initiating intimacy and being unwanted. He told himself that waiting was respectful, that silence protected him from rejection, yet it also kept him distant. Nnenna, on the other hand, misread his restraint as disinterest. She began to wonder if his desire had faded or if she no longer inspired the closeness they once shared. Her confidence wavered, replaced by unanswered questions she was afraid to voice. Both felt exposed in different ways, Tariq guarded by fear, Nnenna by uncertainty. Though they shared the same space, an invisible wall grew between them. They were together every day, yet emotionally alone, each longing for reassurance the other was too afraid to offer. They waited for the other to bridge the gap, retreating into quiet routines that felt safe but hollow. Days became predictable: work, meals, sleep, each action performed with care but little emotional risk. Tariq convinced himself that patience was proof of love, believing that if Nnenna wanted closeness, she would reach for it. Nnenna told herself the same story, interpreting his silence as a sign that he needed space or had already moved on emotionally. Neither wanted to be the one to ask, afraid that wanting more would expose vulnerability or invite rejection. So they settled into parallel lives, sharing space without truly sharing themselves. Even their silences felt rehearsed, filled with unspoken questions and careful restraint. What once felt like comfort now felt like distance disguised as calm. In waiting for the other to speak first, they unknowingly deepened the divide, allowing routine to replace intimacy and caution to override connection. Silence grew heavier than words, filling the spaces where affection once flowed freely. It lingered in the pauses between conversations, in the moments when one of them almost spoke but chose restraint instead. The quiet was no longer peaceful, it carried weight, shaped by fear, assumption, and unmet longing. Tariq felt the silence press against him at night, when he lay awake listening to Nnenna's steady breathing, wondering how they had drifted so far without ever leaving the room. Nnenna felt it during the day, in the absence of simple check-ins and lingering glances that once reassured her without effort. The more they avoided difficult conversations, the louder the silence became, turning ordinary moments into emotional minefields. Each worried that breaking it might expose disappointment or confirm their deepest fears. Yet the unspoken truth remained: silence was no longer protecting their love. It was slowly suffocating it, replacing connection with distance and familiarity with quiet uncertainty. Premarital counseling. Premarital counseling changed everything, not through grand revelations, but through a simple, disarming exercise that required them to name their needs aloud. Sitting across from each other in a quiet room, they were asked to speak without interruption, without defense, and without assumptions. At first, their voices trembled. Tariq admitted his fear of rejection, confessing how past experiences had taught him to stay silent rather than risk feeling unwanted. Nnenna listened, surprised and moved, realizing how deeply his hesitation was rooted in vulnerability rather than indifference. When it was her turn, she spoke honestly about feeling undesired and confused by his distance, afraid to ask for reassurance. Tears came, not from anger, but from relief. They spoke gently, fearfully, and truthfully, discovering that the silence between them had been built on misunderstandings, not a lack of love. For the first time in months, words felt safer than silence, and honesty felt like an invitation rather than a threat. Changed everything. A simple exercise, naming needs aloud, opened honesty. They spoke gently, fearfully, truthfully. They learned that initiation wasn't about dominance, confidence, or proving desire, it was about reassurance. Through open conversation and guided reflection, they began to understand that reaching out first was not a measure of power, but an expression of trust. Initiation meant saying, "I want you, and I'm willing to be seen wanting you." For Tariq, this realization softened years of guardedness. He saw that initiating intimacy did not mean risking rejection alone, it meant inviting connection with honesty. For Nnenna, it reframed her expectations. She understood that waiting in silence was not a test of love, but a missed opportunity for closeness. Together, they recognized that desire thrives where safety exists. Initiation became less about timing and more about emotional presence, reading each other, responding with care, and offering reassurance before fear could take hold. In learning this, they began to replace hesitation with intention, choosing courage over assumption and vulnerability over distance. Slowly, they rebuilt closeness, not through dramatic gestures, but through small, deliberate acts of presence. It began with hand-holding again, intentional, grounding, and unhurried, reminding them of the comfort they once took for granted. They practiced honesty in simple moments, naming emotions before they hardened into silence. When one felt distant, they said so gently, without blame. When one reached out, the other responded with warmth instead of hesitation. They chose to be fully present, putting away distractions, lingering in conversations, and allowing quiet moments to feel safe again. Each choice, though small, stitched something fragile back together. Trust grew as consistency replaced assumption. They learned that closeness is not restored all at once, but built patiently, through repeated acts of care. In choosing presence over avoidance, they rediscovered intimacy as something living and responsive, something that deepens when both partners show up, even when it feels vulnerable. Small gestures became loud declarations, quietly but powerfully saying, "I see you." A lingering touch on the arm while passing in the hallway, an unexpected text in the middle of a busy day, a pause to truly listen instead of rushing to respond, each act carried intention. Tariq began to initiate affection in ways that felt natural to him, offering closeness without fear, trusting that it would be received. Nnenna responded with openness, meeting his efforts with warmth rather than uncertainty. They learned to notice one another again, paying attention to tone, posture, and unspoken needs. Even ordinary moments, sharing a meal, sitting together in silence, felt different when approached with awareness. These gestures required no grand explanation, they spoke for themselves. Over time, consistency transformed them into a language of reassurance. Each small act reinforced safety, reminding both that love was not absent, it had simply been waiting to be acknowledged, nurtured, and chosen again with intention. Love returned, deeper and more intentional, no longer driven by assumption but by choice. What they rebuilt was not the effortless closeness of their early years, but something stronger, rooted in understanding, patience, and emotional courage. Tariq no longer measured his worth by how often he initiated, instead, he trusted that his desire was welcome. Nnenna no longer waited in silence for reassurance, she voiced her needs with clarity and compassion. Together, they learned that intimacy thrives when both partners feel safe to reach and to receive. Their affection carried new depth, shaped by honesty and mutual respect. They laughed more freely, touched more consciously, and spoke with greater care. Love was no longer something they assumed would sustain itself, it became something they actively tended. In choosing each other daily, even in small moments, they discovered that intentional love does not diminish romance. Instead, it deepens it, transforming connection into commitment and affection into a shared, enduring language of trust. Their wedding was joyful, grounded not only in celebration but in understanding hard-earned through honesty and growth. The ceremony reflected who they had become together, intentional, patient, and deeply aware of one another. As Tariq stood at the altar, he no longer carried the quiet fear that once restrained him. Instead, he felt steady, confident in the knowledge that love did not require perfection, only presence. Nnenna, watching him, felt a calm certainty replace the doubts that had once lingered in silence. When they exchanged vows, their words carried weight, shaped by vulnerability rather than fantasy. They promised not only to love, but to speak, to listen, and to reach for each other even when it felt uncomfortable. Family and friends saw laughter, music, and warmth, but beneath the joy was something stronger, a shared commitment to communication. Every smile, every touch, carried intention. The celebration that followed was filled with genuine happiness, not because their journey had been flawless, but because it had been honest. Their marriage began not with illusions, but with clarity, trust, and the courage to choose connection again and again. They stood together, wiser now, choosing communication over assumption in ways both deliberate and tender. Marriage no longer felt like a finish line, but a shared practice, one that required attention, humility, and continuous effort. They learned to ask instead of guess, to speak instead of withdraw. When uncertainty surfaced, they named it early, before it had a chance to grow into distance. Tariq became more comfortable expressing his needs, trusting that vulnerability was not a burden but a bridge. Nnenna learned to voice her desires without waiting for perfect timing, understanding that clarity was an act of love, not pressure. Together, they replaced old habits with new ones, regular check-ins, honest conversations, and gentle reassurance. Misunderstandings still happened, but they no longer feared them. Each challenge became an opportunity to lean in rather than pull away. Standing side by side, they understood that intimacy is sustained not by intuition alone, but by the courage to keep choosing openness, even when silence feels easier. Looking back, they saw their mistake clearly, choosing silence instead of vulnerability when it mattered most. What they once believed was patience or respect had often been fear in disguise. By avoiding difficult conversations, they had unknowingly allowed misunderstandings to grow roots. Tariq realized how often he had protected himself by withholding his needs, assuming love would speak for itself. Nnenna recognized how she had waited for reassurance instead of asking for it, hoping her longing would be noticed without being named. Neither had intended harm, both had simply been afraid of rejection, of appearing weak, or of disrupting peace. Yet the peace they protected was fragile and incomplete. Reflection brought compassion rather than regret. They understood that love does not suffer because of honest words, it suffers when feelings remain unspoken. In acknowledging this, they released blame and replaced it with understanding. Their mistake became a lesson, reminding them that vulnerability is not a threat to intimacy, but the very doorway through which closeness enters and grows stronger over time. They also recognized their strength, their shared commitment to growth, even when it felt uncomfortable. Rather than turning away from tension, they chose to face it together, believing that love was not about avoiding difficulty but about learning through it. They acknowledged that growth required humility, the willingness to admit missteps, to unlearn habits that no longer serve them, and to listen without defensiveness. Tariq saw growth in his courage to initiate and express desire without fear of rejection. Nnenna saw growth in her ability to speak her needs clearly instead of waiting in quiet hope. Together, they embraced the idea that love evolves, and that evolution demands effort from both partners. They stopped measuring success by ease and began valuing resilience. Every honest conversation became proof that their relationship could stretch without breaking. This commitment to growth strengthened their bond, turning challenges into shared victories. They learned that what sustains a marriage is not perfection, but the mutual decision to keep learning, adjusting, and choosing each other with intention through every season. Their outlook became clear: intimacy survives where honesty lives. They understood now that closeness is not preserved by routine or time alone, but by consistent truth shared with care. Honesty, they learned, did not mean harshness or constant confrontation, it meant openness, gentle clarity, and the courage to speak before distance could settle in. When desires shifted or emotions felt unclear, they chose to voice them early, trusting that love could hold the truth without breaking. Intimacy became something they nurtured through conversation as much as touch. By naming needs, fears, and hopes, they created a space where both felt seen and safe. Silence was no longer their refuge, understanding was. Their outlook shaped how they approached marriage moving forward, less focused on perfection, more grounded in transparency. In choosing honesty as a daily practice, they discovered that intimacy does not fade with time. It deepens where trust and truth are allowed to grow together. The lesson was simple, yet powerful: marriage lasts when both partners speak love aloud, through words, touch, and courage, without waiting and without fear. Love cannot rely on assumptions or unspoken expectations, it must be expressed, received, and reaffirmed continually. Tariq and Nnenna learned that affection withheld out of fear slowly erodes connection, while affection offered with vulnerability strengthens it. Speaking love aloud meant naming desire instead of suppressing it, reaching out instead of retreating, and trusting that openness would be met with care. It meant understanding that initiation is not a demand, but an invitation, a way of saying, "I choose you again." They realized that lasting intimacy is built not in grand moments, but in daily decisions to remain emotionally present. Courage, they discovered, is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. By choosing honesty over silence and connection over pride, they created a marriage rooted in trust. Their story affirms a timeless truth: when love is spoken, shown, and courageously shared, it becomes resilient enough to endure every season. Thank you for watching. Please leave comments. Like, share and subscribe so that you will be the first to be notified of our next video coming up.